Hi, I'm Rick Zanotti, and this is eBizChat, where it is all about business. I am joined today by my good friend and co-host, the magical one. It is Dr. Susan Nash. How are you, Susan?
It's great to be here, and I can't wait to talk about some of the things that are happening in terms of businesses and venture capital right now in 2021.
Yeah, that is interesting. And joining us also, he'll be on screen later, it is Harold Mudiati, who's also our video producer. Here we go. This show is sponsored by Relate Corporation. Visit us at www.RELATECasts.net. Thanks. And we are back, and Harold has joined us. And venture capital, I get the feeling that we are somewhere close to the 1998 era, where it's the internet boom, right before things crash again. It reminds me a lot of that right now. People, really worthless companies, are getting 10, 20, 30, 40, 50, $100 million of investment. We know one company that's worth maybe 40 or 50 million, and they got 1.5 billion. Sounds like money laundering to me, but anyway, yeah, who knows?
It reminds me of I agree with you. It reminds me of the 90s, where people were saying, "Oh, well, this is scalable," and they look at the fact that we've globalized, and they think, "Well, okay, I'll be able to sell to everyone who has an internet connection or who has a cell phone, or And kind of like when China was first opening up, people were like, if I could just sell one Coca-Cola to every single person in China. And I think that's driving a lot of it. And there are a lot of underlying assumptions that haven't really been tested. Like, wow, will the market really respond?
It's hard to say. Right now, the market, we all know the market's artificially buoyed, it's artificially dropped. There's a lot of gaming in the market. But aside from that, it does drive certain things. And I think part of the reason we're seeing so much money right now being invested is no one invested anything in 2020. So money's eating holes in people's pockets. It's burning holes in people's pockets, it seems. And we're going back to some strange companies being invested that much money in. And the valuations, I've always thought stock valuations were rather ridiculous when you start valuing companies at 10 times their worth or even more. And we kind of have a little bit of that now. Like I said, we know one company, they were worth an estimate of between $4 and $50 million. And they got 1.5 billion. Hello? I'm just saying hello. Can we have some of that?
I have a product you can invest in.
Or a bridge you can buy.
Yeah. But I think, we've talked about this before on the show. We've talked about how people are looking at inflation, whether it's not acknowledged or not, and they're saying, I'm going to have to hedge against inflation. Mm-hmm. So the first thing they did is they fled the cities and bought real estate. Yeah. And the other things that they've been purchasing are things that are intellectual property, like rights to songs or films or whatever. And now the idea is like, okay, if I can flip this business and sell it in 4 years and have this triple my money or whatever, then I keep up with inflation. But like you said, if you think about some of the things that are actually being invested in, it's not clear that there's even a business plan. there may be a product, there may be an identified market, which is vast and identified, and there may be a way to get it to the market. But there's no plan for partnering. There's no plan for actually getting people excited about it. And it usually reflects the need for one person to drive it all.
Now you were talking pre-show about products and services. That a product really isn't a product. Or
Well, okay, yeah, this is a whole concept. Okay, and you see this on Shark Tank. They kind of get at this, that a product is not a business
hmm,
and a service is not a business. And so, like, I can think of lots of products, like, hey, and they think, okay, wow, and they think it's enough for the product to
hmm,
solve an existing problem.
right.
But that's just the beginning. I mean, we can think of a lot of examples of products that do something, but there's no way to get it to the public. There's no way to scale it.
Hmm.
And then there's no way to like even test it in the field.
It's interesting because if you look at products that get invested in, what is it? 80% maybe never make it to the light of day.
Right.
And one of the worst industries is quote unquote the green industry, because it sounds so cute and so socially responsible. But the reality is half these green industries are total scams, as we've seen with the Cylindras of the world and everything else, where the government invested a ton of money in green companies and not one of them survived.
Well, that is a good business model, though, but it's just not long lived. I mean, the business model is to take the money from the government while it's there.
Yes, that's right.
Well, and
That's right.
one thing that the apparent technology investing boom kind of makes me think of, because I was looking into what companies are being invested in, and by large the biggest sector that's being invested in is technology services, and it kind of makes me think of how between about 2013 and 2019, I think it was, China had like they had a big tech boom too, where you had a lot of technology startups in different sectors in China were getting huge amounts of investment money. Like there was that one company, I think it was called Neo or something, that was an electric car manufacturer that was being touted as, it was going to be the China's answer to Tesla and all that sort of thing, and it kind of ended up going nowhere. They ended up basically, like you said before, they had a product, but their plan to bring it to market wasn't good enough. It wasn't efficient enough. They were costing more to bring the thing it was going to cost more to actually make and sell the thing than the money they were going to be able to make off of it, which obviously doesn't work business wise. And that's the thing. I think with technology, it makes me think of what Ed Stewart keeps telling us. He says, "Don't invest in things you don't understand." And there's a lot of that kind of bamboozlement factor with technology, where it sounds like, wow, this is going to be the next hot thing. I got to jump onto it. So you get these booms of investing that can crash if you have too many people investing in things they don't quite understand, or they're putting too much trust in the people to have a good business sense, when maybe they only have a product, but they don't have the business sense to back it up.
Well, also that kind of goes hand in hand with most people buy, invest, do whatever based on emotion. Not necessarily any logic or common sense, but it's all based on emotion. You buy a stock emotionally. You buy a product emotionally. You have a need for it. You want it. You're emotionally attached to it. And emotions can come and go. They change. And emotions can immediately buoy a product up and then immediately drop it down when the emotions change. And that's part of what we see. So, for example, one company may be really popular today, and then a month from now or a year from now, nobody remembers who they are. They're gone. They've lost the emotion, and that's part of the one of the hardest things to measure in business is emotion, because now you're dealing with something that's not really commonsensical. It's not logical. All you know is that there's going to be a variable, and it could be a big variable at one point. It could be soon, it could be later, but it will happen. Some companies have survived forever. If you look at the Coca-Colas or whatever the world, there's an emotion. I feel good when I drink it. Though Coke's not that popular anymore. Pepsi's actually beating it. But what happens when people don't like it anymore? And emotions are funny. If I tell Susan, I really don't like that sandwich company, subconsciously she's thinking, I don't either. Because that's what happens. We tend to resonate with each other That's how people do things. People resonate. They go, you know what? I don't like that because they don't like it and they must be right. Yeah, I don't like it either.
It's
And
because you're an influencer, Rick.
yes, no, not me, but any one of us could influence anybody at any time, which in turn could influence another person and another one. And you know, those 7 degrees of separation with the internet have really shrunken down. It's not so many degrees anymore, and things get out real quickly. Oh, that's no good. Look at cancel culture. How we cancel things quickly because emotions, absolutely no common sense and plain outright stupidity take over. And as a result, you're canceling idiots. And we're canceling art. We're canceling this, that, out of pure stupidity. What makes that any different from the Salem witch trial? Nothing. Nothing. It's about the same.
Well, I think that we're talking a lot about consumer culture at this point.
Yes. Yeah.
And absolutely the case. But I was thinking also, if we think about the idea of a product that's not a business. I see this every day in technology. For example, sensors. And we talked a couple of weeks ago about collapsing karst and sinkholes, things like that. And we talked about how the danger that is. So now you have sensors that you can put in drones, and you can actually determine the integrity of the basically, just in layman's term, the bedrock.
Yeah.
And you can tell if there's a cavern or something there, a sinkhole that's developing. And then we also had a guest, Ron Bell, who talked about being able to detect it. But the service is still not a business, because a business needs to be able to go on its own. But if you wanted to turn it into a business, the thing to do would be to find, for example, I'm just talking about Florida, find insurance companies that now require people to do a survey to see what the collapse risk is. And then they build that into their plan, and they say, you have to have this kind of drone survey, these sensors to see. Then you have something that can actually be like a machine and go on its own. You have to tweak it, and you have to find markets.
At that point, you can kind of tell people, this is how much money goes in and this is how much comes out, at least as an estimate. Yeah.
Well, it's funny though. Think about on something like that. You look at people who buy houses on the sides of volcanoes. And they can't get insurance for it? They can't get insurance anymore in many places, and they still buy it because it's quote unquote cheap. But there's a reason it's cheap. But it's mind-boggling. People buy a lot of houses on the sides of volcanoes, and that's sort of like with a lot of other products. People buy products that maybe are sort of useless, but they want it for whatever reason.
Well, I mean, how many people buy the really nice houses here that are in the really terrible fire areas that burn down every couple of years?
Yeah, we're in Southern California. And
that's so sad.
And what Howard's talking about is you go to Malibu, and half those houses could either burn or fall due to floods or fall off a soft hill into the ocean. I mean, these are things that could actually happen. And they buy it, and they can't get insurance anymore. But if you're wealthy enough, I guess it doesn't matter. But the thing
is you can't eliminate everything of kind of risk. I mean, for example, my son moved into a different house, and they went through like all kinds of inspections, and it was like completely like well built, perfect, etc. They moved in, and they didn't realize there was an infestation of brown recluse spiders.
Oh dear.
I know. I mean, I'm just wondering how the owners who lived there survived. I mean, apparently they came down from the attic after they moved, and they must have been in all their boxes, and so they said, we want some place to live.
Interesting. And they're not very large spiders, but they're very kind of lethal.
Yeah, and I was reading online, they go, oh, they're not so bad. They've got a bad name, and they're actually little shy spiders, and you can survive. Most people can recover from it within 3 months.
3 months, yeah.
Well, yeah, they recover from it after a big piece of their flesh sloughs off and has to heal. Well, and speaking of California, one of the other things, I guess it's somewhat old news now, but at the beginning of this month, July 1st, the Tier 2, in California, the Tier 2 regulations for computer energy, power consumption defined by the California Energy Commission went into effect. So it's still actually a little bit unclear exactly what that's going to mean, but there was one Alienware desktop computer from Dell that they were initially not able to ship to the state, but I guess now they got cleared or something, so it's still a little unclear exactly how that's going to affect
What is Tier
things.
2? I'm in a non-California
I think it's about
state.
how much you consume, how much electricity you consume in a device.
Because this was a restriction that was implemented in 2 tiers. Basically, it was passed in 2016 based on some projection that computer power usage would outstrip our power generation in the state or something like that. So 2019, July 1st, they had put into place the first tier of standards, which actually they were pretty, like the requirements were not that stringent, so it didn't affect that much. But yeah, they implemented the second tier beginning of this month, and it's starting to look like that might actually, be starting to affect things like manufacturers being able to ship stuff here.
Oh my goodness!
From what I can tell, it's going to be mainly affecting pre-built PCs because that's mainly what they can tell the total.
Well,
idle.
Harold, you know why? Because Apple now has machines that consume less, so then they did a deal. Probably, I'm only speculating. They did a deal, and that only they get the benefit, and everybody else has to make better machines, which they won't for a while. You never know.
Oh my goodness!
This is how business works.
Well, it's like requiring catalytic converters, and only one company has cars with catalytic converters.
That's right. Yeah. Or they required new meters on taxi cabs, but they're only made by one company, which happens to be related to the governor or the mayor or whatever of a city. That's happened everywhere. And you just go, okay. But that's the typical government corporate collusion that goes on. It's always a not good relationship. Well, not good for the consumer. Let's just put it that way.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, efficiency seems good, and green seems good.
Yeah.
But the bottom line is it turns into a no growth or
That's right.
growth limitation type of thing. And I know that some people have said now that growth is bad, and we need to think of like we talked about collapsophy. That we need to talk about how reversal of growth is actually better. Shrinkage.
Yeah, and then of course when you shrink far enough, you're gone. Then what happens?
That's right. We're shrinking our food supply with drought and stuff. Which reminds me of one of the things that we talked about in the conference I just got back from. I listened to people talking about water management and how it's getting closer. Economically, it's getting more economically viable to clean up produced water. That's actually 3 times saltier than the ocean. But it's getting to the point where they can, which can have some really interesting implications.
I can almost hear it now. We're draining our water supply from the ocean.
But this is subsurface water, from produced with oil and gas, and these are these. But the only downside, and nobody's really talked to. Well, we do know what happens because we produce a lot of water with the oil and gas. A lot of times it's 90% water and 10%, and that's a good one, 10% oil.
Yeah.
But if you could clean that up instead of just re-injecting it and causing earthquakes, inducing seismicity.
I think I know what's going to happen once that becomes really economically viable. Is you'll see Nestle buying up all the old
old oil wells.
Oil wells.
Yeah, and that's usually a big thing that people don't. They continue to produce a lot of water because it costs a lot to so-called plug and abandon to leave a well, and so it's cheaper just to kind of pay the price to do what you're doing. But I agree with you. I mean, I'm sure they're already looking at it.
Yeah.
What do you think right now of consumer confidence?
Well, they say that people are buying again. They say a lot of things, I guess.
But is that a reaction to lockdowns?
Well, and I think right now, I think that every time we have uncertainty, like right now we're talking about
Yeah.
the Delta
Massive
variant, and now there's
uncertainty.
like
Yeah.
B.19 whatever variant, and then you do have things that are destabilizing, for example, a medical system or whatever. Every time you have the uncertainty, you have people just either panic buying or not buying at all.
That's true. And it's not even rational buying. Why is all the toilet tissue disappearing again in some places? It's like, okay. Very strange buying patterns in a scarce environment, or the fear of scarcity. It's kind of odd.
Well, I think that there's kind of a sense of despair too. I just got back from a conference in Houston, and the despair feeling I'm talking about is like the idea of like, if we have to get back to as lockdowns, we don't know what will happen to us. And
well, the funny
I
thing
was in
is,
a conference for 3 days in downtown Houston, in the convention center. And downtown Houston is still really, really kind of abandoned because people are still working remotely.
Yeah.
And the hotels are busy on the weekends because of sports, that they are able to have sports. But they're just kind of crawling back. And at the Hilton, they said they were thrilled that they were back 50%.
Yeah, 50. Yeah.
50%.
That's crazy. Unfortunately, as long as we allow medical directors and everybody else to just randomly go off and claim emergency rules and this and that, when nothing's going on. The Delta variant is a very mild, again, 99.975% recuperable. And it's not even strong. They said it's about as strong as a cold. Therefore, what are we?
I don't know about that, though, Rick.
That's what they're saying.
I don't know.
That's what
Well,
doctors are saying. Not
I
the
really don't know.
These are the ones who've been censored, who aren't allowed on. So,
well, I understand that, but like, let's look
Yeah.
at the actual numbers. Here in Oklahoma, there's not even one pediatric hospital intensive care unit bed available, and the hospitals are filling up again. And then in Orlando, they had to cancel a big convention of surgical nurses, and apparently there. And then you have certain parts of Missouri where there are deaths that are filling up morgues. So people are dying.
if that's true.
It is true.
And the reason I say that, the reason I say that, there's been a lot of reporters who've gone to hospitals that were full and they're empty. There's a lot
come
of
on.
that. No, seriously.
Okay, I'm not going to go down this track anymore.
Okay. Well, anyway, but the whole thing is that the variant is mild. It is mild. There's millions of variants on any virus. It just happens. They mutate a lot.
Well, what I will say that in Texas, they had in the convention center, you had signs that said, you can wear a mask. We recommend you wear a mask indoors, but if you've been vaccinated, you don't have to. And I would say that 95% of the people were not wearing masks, except for some of the employees and stuff. And I wore some. I mean, but the ceilings were like 30 feet high. It wasn't. I mean, it didn't seem like you would be in a tight, closed, confined space with sick people.
Yeah.
But we did have one person who didn't have any symptoms, but they had been around a person with symptoms, and they had COVID test. They tested positive, so they voluntarily left.
Well, you know that it came out this week, earlier in the week, that the World Health Organization and our CDC, and they said that the PCR test was incorrect. They said it's at least 50% wrong most of the time. And they admitted finally things that everybody knew from the beginning, that they really can't differentiate COVID from a flu in the test. So this is what they came out with. They finally admitted it, but what does that mean? that means we've been screwing up with all the tests and all the evaluations and a whole mess of other things. So we'll see where that goes. Now,
Well, I think
supposedly,
that,
there's new tests. We'll see.
well, I mean, to get back to your original point about how all this uncertainty and all
Yeah.
these rampant
Mhm.
and conflicting, rampant generation or rampant theories or whatever, and
Yeah.
conflicting ideas, they create so much uncertainty that
Sure.
it's really hard to recover when we're in that situation.
Yeah. Yeah. Definitely not a good one. Well, we
But
are.
that said, I mean, I think that there's certain resiliency, and people were thrilled to see each other get back
Oh,
together.
yeah.
It
Yeah.
was so upbeat, and the atmosphere was great, and like, I don't know. I mean, I think people are getting to the point where they will wear a mask, they'll assume the risk, and go forward. I honestly think that.
We will see.
But I hope that I mean, not taking too much risk. I mean, we shouldn't be rash.
We'll see. Anyway, we are out of time. It is 3:30 already. We look forward to seeing you next week on the show, and there's all sorts of stuff happening economically, so it's going to be interesting. There was one bit of news that was interesting. Rents are going down across this is consumer rents, housing rents, are going down across the whole country except for Idaho. Why Idaho? I don't know. They didn't really say, but it's sort of interesting. Idaho is going up while everybody's going down.
Well, another bit of news. Apparently, supposedly, all this moratorium for foreclosures is going to expire, but prices have gone up on houses to the point where nobody will need to be foreclosed because they can just sell it and make money.
Right.
Well, I don't know because what's happening right now is inventory is starting to come back on the market. That means prices will start dropping. When there was no inventory, prices soared. Now inventory, because everybody says, hey, I can make a lot of money right now. They're starting to sell, and as a result, they're flooding inventory again, and that means it drops. Here we go again. So that's your
That's so funny.
Emotion. Here we go. So it's going to be interesting. But and the interest rates have gone up closer to 3% now. So that's a big drop from 1 point, less than 2 to now it's 2.75 up to 3 in many places. So that's putting a little bit of a kibosh on all the acquisitions, but it
and
is
they don't tell
interesting.
you about the closing costs either.
No, they don't. No, they don't. Because that's extra that you have to pay and everything else. But anyway, should make for a good week, and let's see what happens next week. Like you said, it's still uncertain. There's a lot of things that are happening. We will see.
All right. Thank you for joining in, everyone. Like and subscribe, and we'll see you next time on eBizChat.
Have a good one.
Bye.